The story begins in a large metropolis, in which the sounds of explosions in a high-rise can be heard in broad daylight. Immediately, the guy runs to the scene of the accident with the last of his strength. You can see that he is really worried. People are standing in a panic and don't understand what it is and why there was an explosion. At that moment, a guy in a white hoodie ran up to them, who was really in a hurry because he was sweating a lot. The explosions did not stop, but only continued. There was no longer one, but 10 exactly the same strikes all over the skyscraper at once. Watch to the end. I promise it will be very interesting indeed. People did not understand what was happening and filmed it all on camera, because could it be that terrorists attacked the building? The buses and vehicles also stopped moving along the road and stopped for a while. But it was for nothing, because after a few seconds, the huge stones were already falling toward the road, snagging people and cars that were standing next to them. Panic really swept over the city. Everyone was trying to hide from this horror and save their lives, as even innocent people were suffering. But the guy in the white hoodie kept running. Apparently, he really had some very important goal and knew what he was doing. At that moment, someone looked up at him and started laughing very hard. It was the guy with the blue hair who was glad he could find the guy. Immediately afterwards, he surrounded him with blows in such a way that he had no more to run forward, from which he was very much frightened, and looked in the direction from which the attack was coming. The guy with the blue hair jumped on the car and addressed him, saying, "Stop running away and just let him surrender nicely." This made the guy very scared and didn't know what to say, so he just kept quiet and looked on. His adversary moved even closer and asked in an aggressive tone, did his older brother's words not count for him? This was immediately followed by another wave of blaster blasts that destroyed and incinerated everything around them, and made people flee with the last of their strength in a burst of panic. But the situation began to gain even more aggressive momentum, as a really strong attack came down on the guy, behind which you could only see him and the fire nearby, and absolutely nothing else but shrapnel. The guy was very frightened, because everything around him was exploding, and it looked like it would not end well for him, because even the ground beneath his feet was falling down. All the traffic was going up and exploding. It was really unbearable and scary to be in that place. People panicked, didn't understand what they were going to do and how to escape from this. Everyone was trying to help each other in some way. At this point, his brother started flying in the sky already, with a machine gun looking for a guy who was hiding behind a red Range Rover and didn't know where to run. He noticed him right away and started laughing, and the guy was terrified of being found. But he didn't seem to see it, because he started threatening to tell me what would happen to him if he got his hands on it. The guy panicked and decided to figure out what to do, when suddenly, his phone started falling out of his pocket, and a second later it collapsed on the road, which he definitely could not have expected. After that, his brother made everything clear and stopped to load his weapon and look at the guy, who couldn't even imagine what was about to happen to him. He looked at his brother again, and sweat began to run down his face. But it didn't seem as bad as it seemed at first glance, for his brother immediately ran up to the phone that had fallen down. His eyes lit up and there was a really positive emotion on his face. He was glad he could find it now. He kept smiling and asked, "Is that really how it's going to end up, buddy?" He kept clacking on his phone and absolutely did not understand what to do with it. So he tried to figure out how to deal with it. And the guy just looked at it all and continued to be very frightened. At that moment, he closed his eyes and began to imagine the great basketball player, asking what would he do if he were him. Suddenly, it really hit him. That's why he asked his basketball player to lend him his legendary punching power. He then charged his fist and ran towards his older brother with tremendous force to punch him, while he just kept sitting there on his phone and was very happy about such a find. And then he received a very strong blow to the head with his fist, which he certainly could not have expected. It flew precisely into the target. He was thrown back several dozen meters at once with tremendous velocity. Moreover, it completely broke down several concrete barriers that were used to hold the building together. The guy was just shocked. He had absolutely no idea he was expecting this. Until that moment, he had no idea that his peaceful life would be shattered in an instant. Immediately afterwards, he was on his knees and a blue light was shining over him. He began to regret that he was just going to sell the shoes. But from that moment on, his life was completely turned upside down. And here we are in Seoul, at the subway station, where there are smiling people who are happy about their grades and in a very good mood. Buses and other cars passed quietly along the highway. Everything was fine, and the guy kept walking down the street with his phone and enjoying a nice day. The mood was just fine. In fact, he was in correspondence with some salesman to whom he informed him that as soon as he dropped off the goods, the deal would be done right away. He imagined money and rejoiced. And besides, last night's dream was great too. For some reason, he thought something good was going to happen. And just when he thought about it, he immediately got a call from Yeezy, to whom the guy told him that he would be at the meeting place very soon. He asked her not to worry and hung up. He had a huge smile on his face. This is the first money he will ever earn in his life, which is why he felt such emotion and ran to sell his goods. The girl stood there wearing glasses and a short red skirt, covering her hair with a hood. Though she looked a little suspicious, she looked like she was talking to someone on the phone. Immediately thereafter, he said the guy had the goods and he fit right in. She hid behind a wall and told him to come right away, because she thought she was being watched. But he didn't believe her and said she couldn't fool him. She also added that it was also lunchtime and was a little embarrassed. But her interlocutor was aggressive. Hadn't she already remembered that he can't talk when he's hungry? So she must remain calm and wait for a while until he finished eating. She was also angry, asking if he was joking with her because how could he be? Had he really lost his mind? That's right. I'm not in my right mind at all. And I'm starving. That's it. After that, he hung up, and the girl stood there bewildered, because she couldn't understand that a grown man would do that to her. She continued to shout into the tube with incomprehension. But what good was that anymore? Is he normal? Are all the guys here that weird? In the meantime, our guy was approaching the rendezvous point and hoped it would go well. He took out his phone again and looked at the exact location of the customer, who was very close to him. At this point, he opened his messages, in which the customer from yesterday wrote to him. He was very angry about the shoes he had purchased, because there was a big scratch on the backside. And was he paying that kind of money for that? After this, the guy started receiving threats of physical violence. But he couldn't figure out what it was. Does this customer even know the word IES? After all, he even gave him a 3,000 WON discount. So what more did he want from him? Nothing better than just deleting and blocking this contact the guy couldn't think of. So he did it right away. After that, he had very happy emotions, because he got rid of his annoying client, who was bothering him very much. And the girl kept talking to Kebabo, and told him that by the time she had finished her business, she had to be sure. But suddenly she stopped and was surprised as there were 2 small children standing in front of her, as well as 3 teenagers laughing at her, and taking pictures with their phones. Turns out she was standing near a promotional exhibit that looked exactly like her. The girl knew immediately what a familiar situation this was. A little girl came up to her and said she knew her, because she had seen her on TV. So she asked again, just in case, if she was famous. From such amount of attention and paparazzi, girl was uncomfortable, and her face also began to show cold sweat and emotion of excitement. She began grabbing herself by the hood and didn't understand how the silly girl could have recognized her, for she hadn't yet noticed the moment she was standing in front of her mannequin. And so she sat down to her and started stroking her head, asking if this little girl really needed an autograph, right? The girl confirmed this and said she would wait, at which point they were surrounded on all sides by people with phones who kept laughing and showing their attention in this way. She asked me to wait a little while, and then she would give it to her. She took her head harder and tilted it toward her, telling her to be quiet. After all, more people were about to gather here because of her, which made her a little scared. So the girl suggested she just go home. But the child became very aggressive and grabbed the girl by the hair and then started pulling it in different directions, hurting the girl. She was surprised at such a reaction and tried to calm her down. But when nothing helped her, she immediately got up and started screaming. She couldn't understand why this girl was clinging to her so hard and wouldn't let go of her hair. The child became very aggressive and decided to go into battle. She wanted to wipe absolutely all the makeup off her face, and she didn't want the autograph anymore. She cried and started to run away. The star tried to stop her, asking her to take her words back and scaring her that she would punish her when she caught her. But the child didn't care at all and said she would tell her mother. Meanwhile, a guy was approaching the place where he was supposed to sell sneakers and was listening to music. A girl ran towards him, who had been shouted at in the back that she should live her whole life without a boyfriend. But he didn't even pay attention to her. The only thing he noticed was that for some reason he was really lucky today. The child looked at him and started screaming. Then our hero noticed him just the same, but he didn't quite understand what was going on. Suddenly, she started flying right at him and waving her arms, telling him to get out of the way immediately. He also reprimanded her, telling her to be more careful and look around or she might get hurt. And he was still keeping a positive attitude as suddenly another girl was running behind him, who caught him with her body, and there was a feeling as if she wanted to hug him. He didn't understand what was going on, and a second later the girl completely fell on top of the guy and took him with her. He was shocked by this and fell to the ground with great force, after which he smashed his nose. And how to react to that is not clear. So the guy got up and got very aggressive. He started yelling, just begging the pedestrians to at least watch where they were going. What the hell is this? Where are they all going in such a hurry that they're even hitting people? But still the view in this situation, he decided to see what kind of person it was that hit him. So he turned around and saw a really beautiful girl beside him, which made him feel a little shocked. He looked at her again and saw exactly the same pretty woman as on the billboard of the truck. His happiness was boundless. He tried to compare who she was, and once again he stared at her very intently. And now, after it finally came to him, he was in a stupor. He got a little embarrassed and started asking if the girl was okay, because she must have been really scared. But she just fell to the ground and couldn't come to her senses. She said people were watching. Why jump out of the way so suddenly? The boy pointed out that she was very rude, but she seemed harmless enough. She just told the kid to be careful, and made a point of saying that she was really very annoyed by this world. Could you turn it off somehow? At this point, she was very much frightened and immediately got to her feet. Wait, the soul arc. Where is it? After that, she really started to panic and quickly ran to her phone. There it was. Phew, the scare almost made her life 10 years shorter. Seriously. I'm sorry, Mrs. Cherry. Didn't mean to bump into you. Are you hurt? But the girl really reacted very strangely. She looked at the guy, and even though she was the culprit, she still could not understand what was going on with him, because she was fed up with him, and why did he keep talking to her? After a guy saw such a beautiful girl, he lost the ability to think rationally. That's why he started hitting on her, saying it wasn't just a dream. It was a sign. But the girl just asked him to back off and pushed him away with her hand. But the guy started to panic and get upset that his happiness was running away from him right now. He immediately thought what was wrong with him. But in the meantime, the girl had already run away, because of this stupid schedule, she has to take everything into her own hands. But it looks like it's not all bad, because the newest Porsche is parked in front of the building, and some girl is standing next to it. And now, the guy with blue hair, who is also a superstar, and who a lot of girls are fans of, is already getting out of it, because the newest Porsche is parked in front of the office building, with his fans standing next to it. He immediately went to his manager, asking why he called him in, but he was immediately given a small reprimand for being late, but still came. He put his hands on the table and said in his excuse that he was really busy. After that, his interlocutor just folded his arms and asked, "Why doesn't he come a little earlier next time?" The guy was puzzled. Couldn't he understand that he didn't have time? How long would it take? He also wondered how quickly he would be free. The manager immediately folded his arms and decided to clarify if he had done a good job, right? He worked like a horse? Has he forgotten? This question made him a little surprised. But the manager immediately laughed and went on to say that if he went and looked at what he meant, he would immediately understand everything. Truth be told, we've been very quiet all these years, but we've never had a problem like this before. He smiled again and asked again if he really worked hard, didn't he? His eyes were multicolored, and he seemed to be up to something. After all, today, they're taking control of everything. At this point, the guy with the blue hair got behind the wheel of the Porsche and asked, "Is he looking forward to this?" Then he gave the gas on the road and started to overtake everyone. But back to our guy in the white hoodie, he really wanted to stop the beautiful girl because he wasn't messing with her, and he really was. She was really beginning to realize that she was in trouble, and she wondered if the shoebox was really in his hands. She just started begging the universe that it wasn't so, and she started hitting the shoebox with all her might, smiling at the same time. The guy tried to stop her, but he didn't succeed. After that, he really started crying a lot because he couldn't have expected that. These were his favorite sneakers that his parents had given him as a birthday present. They had their own story. They were Jordans from the collection that the legendary basketball player wore. And so these sneakers from such a strong impact immediately reached the highway, or to be more precise, just fell on the road on which the Porsche was driving just towards them. The guy saw the whole picture and just couldn't hide his emotions. He really started crying a lot. At this point, the driver was just picking his nose and wasn't worried about anything, unlike the guy who just kept crying. And then the sneakers are almost under the bumper of the car, and a second later the Porsche runs them over completely with both wheels. They were very badly torn and had lost their marketable appearance. The guy with the blue hair noticed that something had gone wrong, but he didn't pay any attention to it. Our hero walked over to his sneakers, which were almost unrecognizable, and just fell on his knees in front of them. It was obvious that he really valued and loved them very much. He lifted one sneaker up to see what happened to it, and from what he saw, just continued to cry, because he did not understand why this is happening to him now. He just wanted to make some money and sell his sneakers. At this point, he remembered a place where you can sell them quickly. It was Seoul Yoksam, to be exact, the online shopping mall, which sold things, but not the original, but copies. But there were no other options. I had to make at least some money. It was an offline store where you come in and you can try on any shoes on yourself. He immediately put these red Jordans in front of him, which he tried to make as marketable as possible. And, let's face it, he succeeded. They stood out from the rest of the sneakers because they really had a special story. Immediately another man came up to him and asked, "You are Air Jordan on Lee Bay, right?" He immediately responded and smiled, clarifying if the guy was really a Yeezy too. Moreover, he immediately noticed that he looked exactly like him. It seems they are the same age. But why is he moving around this mall? He immediately looked down and noticed his sneakers, which surprised him a little, because they were from the new collection, and they also looked very nice on his feet. The guy immediately congratulated him and said, "You got it all. I ain't too shabby, I guess." But he hesitated for a second, because Mr. Air Jordan, unlike what you posted, there's a huge dent on the box. This is huge problems for me. This is like an E-Trade 101. Sharp eye. I should have switched the box too. He had an accident on the way, and was so scared that he dropped the box. Even though it was damaged, its contents were intact and unharmed. Take a look at this. Oh, they look really good, but wasn't anyone discouraged by the smell? He was very surprised, for the sneakers were really starting to stink. The guy was worried because did he really notice it? All he had in mind was that the buyer would buy them as quickly as possible. So he clarified that it was the smell of vacuum packaging. They had only recently been made. Seeing that such a silly argument wasn't working, the guy slapped the table and said that, just like that, he would do a 20% discount on the whole deal. After that, the buyer thought, because such a huge discount could not help but surprise. At this point, the guy apologized again and said it was just a crazy price and offered a discount of even 40%. How's that for him? He was trying to do everything he could to sell the sneakers and was very worried. That's really great. So he agreed but said he would still take vouchers from the mall in return, which everyone agreed to and made the deal. As you can imagine, at this mall, the guy had just sold his pair of sneakers, which had suffered an accident and had completely lost their marketability. Meanwhile, in the city, life continued and everything was quiet. The girl was walking down the street and catching glances of people passing by, who turned around and watched her beauty. She realized that this day was the worst day of her life, and immediately afterwards she remembered that it looked like Kebab had already finished eating now. I wish I hadn't spoiled anything. She had such thoughts and looked at her phone. I cannot let my guard down. I oughta bring Kababo over here and move the soul arc somewhere safe. Time to work for a living. Kababo, come over to this realm now. These were the thoughts in her head. Then she turned on her phone and ordered Soul Arc Unleash. She summons Kabbalah. Then she clicked on it and an image of a girl appeared. She couldn't figure out why this photo was on the loading screen. Could it be a mistake of some kind? She was panicked and worried if she could handle it on her own. She started to press the button with her fingers.